The boarding gate at B23 was supposed to hum with routine laptops clicking, coffee cups cooling, the shuffle of carry-ons across tile. Instead, it froze under the weight of one sentence. "This boarding line is not for you. Step aside now." The voice cracked like a whip, sharp enough to slice through the low murmur of the terminal. Heads turned, screens dimmed, a silence stretched, pulled taut like wire. At the center of it, a young black man in a tailored suit. He stood steady, shoulders squared, no baggage except the ticket in his hand. Across the counter, the gate agent leaned forward, finger extended like a verdict, her words still vibrating in the stale airport air. Behind her, another attendant hovered in rigid silence, posture tight, eyes betraying unease. And scattered across the rows of molded chairs, travelers looked up from their phones, men in business attire, briefcases balanced on knees, their curiosity sharpening into judgment. The man didn't flinch, not at the voice that told him to step aside, not at the pointing finger. He had heard this melody before, just in different venues, banks, hotels, boardrooms. A familiar chorus of doubt, always starting the same way. "You don't belong here." The gate agent wasn't done. She raised her voice for the audience she suddenly realized she had. "Your ticket must be fake. We've seen this trick before." The words dropped heavy, louder than the overhead announcement calling another flight. A couple near the window whispered. Someone in the back seat chuckled softly, as if this was entertainment, not humiliation. And still, the man stayed silent. His hands rested lightly against his suit jacket, his ticket steady between his fingers. Calm wasn't weakness here, it was defiance. His stillness drew the spotlight tighter than any outburst could. From 3 rows back, a younger passenger slid a phone halfway out of his pocket. The red lens caught the glow of the terminal lights, waiting for a story to ignite. But before it could, the black man turned his head slightly, voice low but firm. "Don't record, not yet." It wasn't fear, it was control. He wasn't here to go viral, he was here for justice. The air inside Gate B23 thickened. The hum of the crowd shifted from bored to charged. A storm was forming, and every witness knew they were about to see more than a boarding dispute. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to him. The silence after that warning, "Don't record, not yet," did not settle. It spread. Gate B23 no longer sounded like an airport terminal. It felt like a courtroom, and everyone was waiting for the next witness to speak. The man stood still, his ticket still unshaken between his fingers. His clothes were simple but cut clean, a black suit without shine, a tie tied tight as if he'd done it 1,000 mornings before. No Rolex, no gold cufflinks, no show. He knew the look on the agent's face, disbelief sharpened into insult. To her, he didn't fit the picture of a VIP traveler. He had been training for this moment long before he stepped into Terminal B, not training with instructors or bodyguards, but with life itself. He remembered being 21, standing in a lobby of a bank in Atlanta, his first business loan application folded neatly inside a folder. He had rehearsed the pitch, prepared collateral, printed statements in triplicate, but the banker had looked at his ID, then at his skin, then at his clothes, and finally leaned back with a smirk. "You look a little ambitious for someone your age. Come back when you've got something real." The folder had felt like lead in his hands. He hadn't yelled then either. He had walked out silently, already calculating how to prove them wrong. Now, years later, silence was his armor again. The gate agent mistook it for weakness. Her voice rose higher, louder, feeding off the crowd. "Sir, you are holding up real passengers. Step aside before this becomes a scene." But the scene had already begun. Every cough, every shuffle, every glare from the rows behind him were lines in the script. The man didn't write them, but he knew exactly how this play would end. A business traveler in a navy suit leaned toward his colleague, whispering just loud enough, "Fake ticket, guaranteed." Another chuckled, eyes darting between the man's calm face and the agent's clenched jaw. He heard it all. He had heard it before. In the lobby of a hotel in Miami at 28, luggage in hand, after a red-eye flight. The clerk had glanced at his reservation and said, "This suite is above your pay grade." He hadn't argued then either. He had watched, waited, and let the system reveal its cracks. Hours later, when the ownership documents were pulled, the same clerk had paled at the truth. The man she dismissed was part of the holding group that owned the hotel. Back at Gate B23, he exhaled slowly, eyes still fixed ahead. He wasn't reliving memories for sympathy. He was measuring the rhythm. Disrespect always started loud. But justice, real justice, landed Keeter. The second attendant behind the counter shifted her weight, clearly uneasy. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her glance flicking from the shredded ticket to the man's steady hands. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to speak, but the lead agent's sharp side glance cut her silence deeper. A mechanical voice echoed overhead. Final boarding for Flight 217 to Los Angeles. Passengers stirred, but their focus didn't leave the confrontation. The boarding gate wasn't just a passage to the sky anymore. It was a stage where dignity was on trial. And the man in the black suit was not about to lose. The gate agent's tone hardened. She slid the torn ticket stub across the counter like it was evidence of a crime. "Security's on the way. You can't hold this line any longer." Her words weren't just for him, they were for the crowd. She wanted witnesses, a chorus to back her up, and she was getting them. A man in a gray blazer muttered, "Some people just try to sneak into perks they can't afford." Another, scrolling his phone, looked up long enough to add, "Every week it's the same scam." The black man didn't blink. His posture didn't fold under their commentary. Silence, again, was sharper than any rebuttal. The second attendant stepped forward slightly, her voice unsure, softer than the lead's. "Maybe we should just scan it again." But she was cut off immediately. "Enough. I know a fake when I see one." The declaration landed heavy, like a gavel. Passengers shifted, caught between the authority of her uniform and the doubt gnawing at their instincts. In the third row, a young woman tightened her grip on her boarding pass. Her whisper carried farther than she expected. "He's not even raising his voice." Her friend glanced at her nervously, afraid to agree out loud. The man at the counter finally moved. Not to argue, not to plead. He simply placed his ticket stub flat on the counter, smoothed it once with his palm, and looked the agent in the eye. Calm, still, unshakable. That composure only seemed to provoke her. "Don't stare at me like that. You don't belong in this line." The sentence cracked through the terminal louder than any boarding announcement. A few phones tilted higher, cameras sliding into recording mode. The younger passenger who had tried to film earlier raised his device again, lens trembling as it caught the unfolding storm. The black man's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed low, steady. "I told you, not yet." A ripple ran through the waiting area. The crowd wasn't sure who he was speaking to anymore, the agent, the passenger with the phone, or someone else entirely. Then came the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, approaching fast across the polished floor. The shift supervisor emerged, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights, his presence meant to end debate. He scanned the scene once, eyes cold, already siding with his staff before a word was spoken. "Sir, this gate is for verified priority passengers only. Step aside, or we will remove you." It wasn't a request. It was a warning, delivered with the weight of authority he assumed could not be challenged. The man in the suit didn't move. He had seen this same stance before different faces, same script. Authority, when unchecked, always mistook silence for surrender. But surrender was the last thing on his mind. The passengers knew it too. They could feel it in the stillness of his shoulders, in the way his hand never shook, in the way his calm outlasted every insult thrown his way. Gate B23 wasn't just holding a flight anymore. It was holding its breath. The supervisor planted himself firmly behind the counter, arms crossed like he was guarding a vault. His voice carried through the terminal. "Last chance. Step aside before this becomes official." The crowd stirred. Some passengers leaned forward, waiting for the confrontation to snap. Others shrank back, eyes darting between the man in the suit and the authority lined up against him. But the black man didn't move. His silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate, heavy, a silence that pressed harder than shouting ever could. He lifted the torn boarding stub gently from the counter and tucked it back into his jacket. No rush, no panic. Every motion carried the weight of someone who knew time was on his side, not theirs. The lead agent bristled. "Why aren't you saying anything? If you're legit, prove it." Her voice was sharp, but her eyes flickered with something else unease. He held her gaze, then lowered it slowly to the ground, as if measuring the space between dignity and humiliation. The pause stretched long enough for murmurs to ripple through the rows of waiting passengers. A woman in the fifth row whispered, "He's calmer than all of them." Her seatmate nodded, uneasy. The supervisor slammed his hand against the counter, a loud crack that startled even the second attendant. "Sir, do not ignore me." The man's reply came finally, low and even, each word deliberate. "I am not ignoring you. I am listening, and I am giving you the chance to realize what you're doing." The supervisor scoffed, mistaking patience for arrogance. "You don't get to lecture me here. This is my gate, my rules." The man only inclined his head slightly, as though cataloging the words for later. Somewhere in the crowd, the young passenger with the phone raised it higher, emboldened now. His lens framed the black man's steady face against the flustered agents. The stillness was captivating, an image of restraint in a place built on motion. Flashbacks flickered behind the man's calm exterior. He had been here before, not in an airport, but in boardrooms where his ideas were dismissed until a balance sheet proved them too profitable to ignore. In hotels where his card was questioned until the system revealed his name buried deep in the ownership records. Each time, silence had been his weapon, his patience, the blade. Now, inside Gate B23, the same pattern played out. The louder his accusers became, the smaller their authority looked in comparison. The second attendant's voice cracked the tension. "Maybe we should—" She stopped when the supervisor shot her a glare. She lowered her head quickly, complicit by silence. The black man remained motionless. Every insult, every raised voice, every accusation only built the stage higher. He didn't need to climb it. He was letting them build it for him. In the waiting area, the atmosphere thickened. The passengers weren't sure what they were watching anymore, a dispute over a ticket, or something larger, something that felt like a test of dignity itself. The man folded his hands lightly in front of him. His voice, when it came again, was almost a whisper, but the room carried it. "When the truth arrives, remember this moment. Remember how you treated me before you knew who I was." No shouting, no threats, just stillness sharpened into a warning. And Gate B23, once a place of routine, now pulsed with anticipation. The crowd at Gate B23 had shifted from restless to riveted. The flight announcements faded into background noise. What held the terminal's attention now wasn't departure times, but the man in the black suit, standing silent in defiance. A young passenger near the corner finally broke the invisible barrier. His phone was already out, lens trained steady on the confrontation. The red light blinked to life, a quiet witness glowing in the charged air. The supervisor spotted it immediately. "Put that away. This isn't a spectacle." But his command only made the passenger hold the phone higher. "Looks like it already is," he muttered, voice caught on the recording. A ripple of unease passed through the staff. The second attendant glanced at the phone, then back at the man in the suit. She bit her lip, hesitation painted across her face. From the third row, a woman in a travel sweater leaned forward. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Why are you treating him like he's guilty before you even check again?" Murmurs rose. A man in business casual shook his head and whispered to his companion, "Policy or prejudice, can't tell which." His companion tapped at his phone screen, already scrolling for the airline's complaint line. The black man didn't move. His calm had become contagious while the staff grew louder. The passengers grew sharper, their whispers shifting from doubt to suspicion. The lead agent, desperate to reassert control, raised her voice. "Everyone stay seated. We are handling a fraudulent ticket. Security is on the way." The word fraudulent landed like a spark on dry tinder. Phones lifted higher, lenses widening, recording angles multiplying. The more the staff insisted, the more the crowd doubted. The young passenger with the phone spoke again, bolder now. "If he's fraudulent, why won't you scan the ticket again? Why tear it instead?" The supervisor's jaw tightened. "You don't understand protocol, sit down." But protocol wasn't what the passengers were watching. They were watching a man who hadn't raised his voice once, surrounded by authority that seemed more desperate with every word. In the back, an older traveler cleared his throat. "I've flown this airline for 20 years. I've never seen staff rip a ticket before. That's not procedure." His words carried the weight of experience. Heads turned toward him. The narrative was slipping. The black man finally looked up, eyes steady, and spoke just loud enough for those around him to hear. "Use your words, not your cameras. Truth speaks louder than angles." The young passenger lowered his phone slightly, torn between recording and respecting the command. The crowd hushed, waiting to see what he would choose. A tension thicker than jet fuel filled the air. Every second of silence now felt heavier than the shouting that had filled the gate minutes earlier. And somewhere beyond the terminal glass, a plane engine roared to life, a reminder that time was moving forward, but justice was waiting to board. The hum of voices at Gate B23 had turned into a low current of discontent. Every passenger could feel the charge in the air, and the staff at the counter knew it too. Their control was slipping, so they pushed harder. The supervisor leaned over the counter, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Sir, let me be clear. You are not boarding this flight. You can argue. You can stand here all day, but you will not step onto that jet bridge." He wanted finality, but finality didn't come. Instead, it unraveled. The lead agent, emboldened by his stance, stepped forward. "People like you always try this. Fancy card, fake ticket, fake story. You think calm makes you convincing? It doesn't. It makes you suspicious." Gasps scattered through the waiting area. That phrase, "people like you," echoed louder than any boarding announcement. Phones tilted upward again. Someone whispered, "She just said that out loud." The second attendant stiffened. She looked ready to intervene, but the supervisor's glare pinned her back into silence. From the corner, a man in a tailored suit chuckled under his breath. "VIP boarding isn't a charity line, let's not waste time." The crowd shifted. Some passengers frowned, others looked down at their phones, but the weight of the insult hung thick in the air. Through it all, the black man stood steady. His ticket stub still rested inside his jacket pocket. His silence didn't shrink, if anything. It expanded, filling the space the staff tried to dominate. The supervisor slammed a clipboard onto the counter, papers rattling like loose thunder. "We're not debating this. You are denied boarding. End of discussion." The older traveler from before, the one with 20 years of flights behind him, raised his voice now. "End of discussion? You ripped his ticket without scanning it twice. That's not procedure." His protest drew nods. A young woman with earbuds pulled one out, adding, "Exactly. You skipped the process and jumped to accusation." The lead agent snapped back. "Stay out of this. He doesn't belong in VIP, and that's final." Her words trembled at the edges, but her volume grew louder, desperate to mask the cracks forming in her authority. The black man finally lifted his gaze, meeting hers directly. His voice was low, measured, impossible to ignore. "You're destroying more than my ticket. You're destroying your own credibility." The crowd stirred again. His calm words rang truer than the staff's shouts, but the supervisor doubled down, raising his voice so the whole terminal could hear. "Security will remove you in minutes. You will not be flying with us today. Period." The statement hung in the air like a verdict. Phones kept recording. Passengers whispered louder. And through it all, the man in the black suit remained unmoved, calm, silent, a storm waiting for its cue. Gate B23 wasn't just a checkpoint anymore. It had become a stage for arrogance, and every insult only set the lights brighter on the ones delivering it. The words, "You will not be flying with us today," hadn't even settled before the lead agent reached across the counter. With a snap of her wrist, she yanked the torn stub from his jacket pocket, held it up like contraband, and shredded it clean down the middle. "Fraudulent. Null. You're done here." The sound of paper ripping carried through the gate like thunder in a storm. Passengers gasped. A woman near the window covered her mouth. The young man with the phone whispered, "She just destroyed evidence." The supervisor didn't flinch. He doubled down, voice booming. "Call airport security. Notify TSA. Flag his name. He's not just off this flight, he's blacklisted." Blacklisted. The word ricocheted through the terminal, sharp and final. A ripple of disbelief moved through the rows of seats. This wasn't procedure anymore. It was punishment. The second attendant's face drained of color. She tried to speak, her voice trembling. "Sir, maybe we should—" But the supervisor cut her off with a glare and a barked command. "Do as you're told. Make the call now." She hesitated, then lifted the receiver with shaking hands. The click of the line opening was loud enough to carry. Her voice wavered as she recited, "This is Gate B23. We have a fraudulent passenger, requesting immediate removal." The older traveler who had spoken earlier stood halfway from his seat. "Fraudulent? Based on what? You haven't shown a single proof." Another voice joined, young, sharp, indignant. "You don't blacklist someone because of a suit and a ticket. That's insane." The passengers were no longer just watching. They were questioning. But the staff pressed harder, mistaking dissent for disorder. The lead agent turned toward the growing crowd. Her words sharp, desperate. "Everyone stay seated. Do not interfere. This man is a threat to the integrity of the flight." A mother with her child whispered, "Threat? He hasn't moved a muscle." The black man finally shifted. He bent down, retrieved the shredded ticket from the counter, and smoothed the pieces against his palm as if they were still whole. His calm eyes lifted to meet the supervisor's glare. His voice was quiet, but it landed heavy. You just committed more than one violation, and every word, every action you've made it public. The phones rose higher, lenses catching the fragments of paper in his hand, the fury on the staff's faces, the silence of his restraint. The supervisor leaned forward, voice near a growl. You think your calm scares me? Wait until the police arrive. You're finished. But as he spoke, the crowd wasn't nodding. They were frowning, shifting, murmuring. Because in the man's stillness, they saw something the staff could not, dignity holding its ground while arrogance collapsed around it. And in that moment, Gate B23 was no longer about boarding. It was about belonging. The shredded ticket rested in his palm like broken glass, but his grip was steady. He studied the fragments for a moment, then slipped them neatly into his jacket pocket as though filing evidence for later. Then, without raising his voice, he reached into that same pocket and pulled out a phone. The gesture was calm, almost ordinary, yet it shifted the entire atmosphere. He pressed a single button. The line clicked open. Activate protocol. The words were soft, measured, but they cut through the gate louder than the supervisor's shouting. A pause, then a voice on the other end, crisp, professional, unshaken. Confirmed. All systems are live. Do you want this logged publicly? The black man glanced at the rising wall of phones aimed in his direction, passengers recording every angle, every insult, every act. His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. Yes, timestamp everything. Begin documentation. The lead agent stiffened. What are you doing? Who are you calling? He didn't answer her. His silence was the sharpest answer of all. The second attendant froze, her eyes darting to the phone in his hand, then to the supervisor, then back again. She looked like she wanted to step away from the counter altogether. The supervisor barked, trying to drown the moment. That won't save you. Security's almost here. You're wasting your time. But the man on the phone didn't flinch. The voice on the line spoke again. Incident log running. Upload secure. All staff actions recorded. Would you like the executive desk notified? This time, he lifted his gaze straight into the supervisor's eyes. His reply was calm, precise, each syllable carrying weight. Yes, notify the desk, and mark this as a priority. The crowd shifted. The words carried an edge, a quiet authority that didn't match someone accused of fraud. A businessman near the window muttered, "Executive desk? What the hell does that mean?" The older traveler who had spoken earlier leaned forward in his chair, eyes narrowing. He whispered to no one in particular, "He's not just a passenger." The lead agent tried to laugh, but the sound rang hollow. "Executive desk? Nice trick. You think you can scare us with big words?" But her voice trembled. She could feel the tide turning. The black man ended the call with one simple word. "Stand by." The phone slipped back into his pocket. His posture didn't change. His silence returned, but it wasn't the silence of submission. It was the silence of someone who had just moved the board while everyone else thought the game hadn't even started. The passengers sensed it. Phones tilted closer, lenses trying to catch his face, his calm, the quiet gravity around him. Something in the air shifted. The staff thought they were dealing with a problem, but the crowd began to suspect they were witnessing a reckoning. Gate B23 wasn't waiting for security anymore. It was waiting for revelation. The gate had grown restless, like an audience waiting for the curtain to drop. Security still hadn't arrived, but the tension was already suffocating. Phones hovered in every row, recording every twitch of expression. The staff shifted behind the counter, their confidence fraying with every second of silence. And then the black man finally spoke. He reached into his jacket, not for a wallet or ID, but for a small black card case. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and set a single card flat on the counter. Not a boarding pass, not a credit card. A shareholder identification, embossed with the airline's crest in silver. Gasps rippled through the waiting area. The second attendant blinked hard, leaning closer before the supervisor shot her a warning glare. But it was too late. Everyone near the front had seen it. The man's voice was calm, steady. "You tore my boarding ticket, but you forgot one thing. I don't just board your flights, I own them." The words hit harder than any shout. Passengers froze, eyes wide. A woman whispered into her phone camera, "He just said he's an owner." The lead agent laughed nervously, her voice cracking. "That's impossible. You expect us to believe you're some shareholder." He tilted his head slightly, like a teacher waiting for a student to catch up. "Not some shareholder. A principal investor, which means every flight you guard, every gate you man, every seat on this plane you answer to me." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Someone near the back muttered, "No way, he's serious." Another whispered, "This is about to go viral." The supervisor tried to salvage control, his voice loud but shaky. "Even if you were, that doesn't give you the right to disrupt boarding." The black man's reply was colder than steel. "Disrupt? You destroyed my ticket. You accused me of fraud in front of witnesses. You attempted to blacklist me from the very airline that carries my name on its ownership papers." He let the silence hang, the truth sinking deeper into the air. Then he leaned forward slightly, his words precise, unshakable. "You didn't just deny a passenger, you insulted your employer." The weight of that sentence cracked the atmosphere. Gasps turned into open stares. Even those who doubted seconds ago sat up straighter, their skepticism dissolving. The young passenger filming whispered, half to himself, half to the thousands already watching on his live stream, "He owns the airline. Oh my God, he actually owns it." The supervisor's face drained of color. The lead agent's hands trembled against the counter. The second attendant stepped back entirely, her silence no longer compliance but distance. And the black man stood there, calm as stone, while dignity and truth finally shifted the entire gate in his direction. Gate B23 was no longer just a checkpoint. It had become a reckoning, and the verdict was clear. Power had never been on the side of the uniform. It had been standing silently in front of them all along. The silver crest on that shareholder card gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The silence that followed was thicker than the terminal air. For the first time since the standoff began, it wasn't the black man who looked out of place, it was the staff. The supervisor's face had drained of authority, colorless and rigid. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no words formed. The lead agent, who had torn the ticket with such confidence, now clutched the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Her earlier bravado collapsed into shallow breaths. The second attendant took a full step back. Her hands trembled, not from fear of him, but from fear of being tied to the mess unraveling in front of dozens of recording eyes. And the passengers? They erupted. A clap rang out, first hesitant, then stronger. It came from the older traveler in the fourth row, the one who had defended procedure earlier. He rose to his feet, applauding with deliberate rhythm. Others joined, scattered at first, then united, until the gate pulsed with the sound of approval. Phones captured everything, the applause, the pale faces, the calm man who hadn't needed to raise his voice once. Streams of comments scrolled across live feeds. "Justice served at Gate B23. He owns the airline? Unreal. Watch this, go viral tonight." The young passenger, who had been filming from the start, whispered breathlessly into his camera. "They called him a fraud. They blacklisted him. And he's the shareholder. This is insane." A mother with her daughter shook her head, murmuring, "I hope she remembers this calm is stronger than cruelty." The black man didn't raise a hand to quiet them. He didn't bask in their cheers. He simply stood, shoulders steady, the picture of composure while chaos crumbled around him. The supervisor finally found his voice, but it cracked on the first word. This doesn't change protocol." But the words rang hollow. Even he knew it. Every camera lens locked onto him like a spotlight, and in that glare, his authority withered. The lead agent whispered, "Desperate now. Please. We didn't know." The black man's eyes shifted toward her, steady and calm. His reply was quiet, but it silenced the applause for a moment. "That's the problem. You never ask. You only assume." Gasps rippled again. Some passengers shook their heads, muttering agreement. Others held their phones tighter, making sure they caught every syllable. The young passenger whispered into his stream, "He didn't just flip the script, he rewrote it." At Gate B23, authority had inverted. Staff who had once wielded power now shrank in fear. Passengers who had sat silent were standing, clapping, recording, and at the center stood one man, calm as ever, a storm contained in silence, proving that dignity didn't need to shout to be heard. The applause faded into murmurs, but the energy in Gate B23 had shifted for good. Phones hovered high, waiting for the next moment. The supervisor wiped his palms against his slacks, his authority collapsing with every second. The lead agent avoided eye contact entirely, staring down at the counter as if the laminate surface could shield her. The black man slipped his phone from his pocket again. A single button, a single call. The line connected instantly. "Executive desk, this is Carter." The name alone silenced the space. Even those who had doubted now leaned in, realizing they were witnessing not just a confrontation but a reckoning A calm voice answered on speaker, crisp and authoritative. Yes, sir. Incident flagged at Gate B23. We're live on the feed. The lead agent's head snapped up, eyes wide. Feed, she whispered, panic dawning. The man's voice was steady, almost surgical. Suspend all access credentials for Supervisor Daniels and Agent Rowe. Effective immediately. Gasps erupted. The second attendant covered her mouth. Daniels, the supervisor, stepped back like he'd been struck. You can't do that. The voice on the line replied without hesitation. Processed. Their IDs are now inactive. Gate clearance revoked. Daniels grabbed his badge, swiped it against the reader at the desk red light. Locked out. The color drained from his face. Rowe, the lead agent, tried hers. Red again. The sound of denial echoed like a verdict. Passengers broke into whispers, then laughter, then applause again. Someone shouted, "Justice!" Another yelled, "That's what you get!" The young passenger filming caught it all, narrating breathlessly. He just had them suspended live. Their badges are useless. This is insane. Rowe's voice cracked, desperate now. Please, we didn't know who you were. The black man turned toward her, calm as ever. You didn't need to know who I was. You only needed to treat me like who I am, a human being. Applause thundered again. A few passengers stood, clapping hard enough to echo through the terminal. Others simply nodded, faces solemn, as if witnessing something bigger than travel, a small piece of justice delivered in real time. Daniels tried once more, voice shaking. This isn't fair. The man didn't flinch. Fair is what you denied me the moment you tore my ticket. Consequences are what you face now. Phones captured his words. Passengers repeated them in whispers, the moment immortalized long before the flight would ever leave the ground. At Gate B23, punishment didn't arrive with shouting or fists. It arrived with quiet precision, a locked badge, and a man who never needed to raise his voice to win.